The day my sister-in-law called me barren, she was already celebrating a pregnancy that didn't belong to my husband. But what she didn't know was that the child she paraded as victory would be the very thing that destroyed her. A story written by stories that linger. The day Peter chose Sarah, war entered the Okafor family. Not shouting, not fighting, war in silence. There were 10 children in that house, 8 daughters and 2 sons, but only one voice truly mattered. Adana, the eldest, the iron spine of the family, the woman whose approval felt like oxygen and whose disapproval felt like exile. After their parents died, she didn't just step up, she took over. Every marriage, every business move, every major decision passed through her. So when Peter, her younger brother, stood in the middle of the living room and said, "I am marrying Sarah," the ground shifted, because Adana had already chosen Anita. Anita was perfect on paper, wealthy background, polished manners, social connections. A strategic wife. The kind of woman who would strengthen the family's influence. Love was never part of the calculation. Marriage to Adana was a transaction. But Peter wasn't negotiating. "This is the woman my heart beats for," he said again, this time holding Sarah's hand. And that was the moment something hardened inside Adana. She didn't scream. She didn't protest. She simply smiled. That smile should have been a warning. The wedding went on without her blessing, and Sarah entered the Okafor home believing kindness would win them over. She woke before dawn to cook. She washed clothes until her fingers wrinkled. She endured corrections delivered like insults. She kept telling herself, "If I love them enough, they will love me back." But families like that don't run on love. They run on power. 3 months passed, then 6. No pregnancy. The whispers started as concern. Then concern became comparison. And comparison became cruelty. "You're still not expecting? Maybe some women are just not destined for motherhood. Anita would have given us a child by now." Anita began visiting more often, always dressed perfectly, always laughing a little too loudly, always positioning herself near Peter, just long enough to be noticed. And Adana? She watched everything. Soon Sarah's chores doubled. Every mistake became proof of inadequacy. Every meal tasted wrong, every effort was dismissed, and one morning, as Sarah bent over a mountain of laundry, the word finally struck her like a slap. Barren. It wasn't whispered, it was declared. Peter defended her, but even his voice was starting to sound tired under the weight of family pressure. What Sarah didn't know, what Peter didn't know, was that their problem was no longer biological. It had become spiritual, because somewhere, in the shadows of loyalty and jealousy, a line had already been crossed. And when a womb is bound by envy, love is forced to fight for survival. But the greatest shock was not the cruelty. It was the truth that was still waiting to be born. If jealousy had a sound, it would be the quiet footsteps Adana took that night. No one saw her leave the house. No one asked where she was going. In a family where she was authority, she did not owe explanations. But the road she took that evening was not one a loving sister should ever know. It led beyond the bright streets of town, beyond churches, beyond reason. They said the man she visited did not advertise his services. They said you only found him when desperation was louder than conscience. Faded red cloth tied to a crooked tree, the smell of burnt herbs in the air. Adana did not tremble. "I want her removed," she said calmly. The native doctor studied her for a long moment. "Removed from the house?" "No," she replied. "From destiny." The words hung heavy between them. What followed was not loud. No thunder, no dramatic chants, just whispers, powders, and instructions given in coded language. Something to be buried, something to be tied, something to be done before dawn. And when Adana walked away that night, she carried nothing in her hands, but something had been set in motion. Back in the Okafor house, Sarah began to feel it. Her body changed first. Her cycles became irregular. Strange pains bloomed in her lower abdomen, like invisible bruises. She prayed harder, fasted longer, drank every herbal mixture recommended to her. Peter held her at night, whispering promises he believed with all his heart. But love does not always explain what science cannot see. The humiliation escalated. Adana no longer disguised her disdain. Every morning came with new insults. Every evening with fresh comparisons. Sarah washed piles of clothes that were not hers, ironed garments until midnight, scrubbed floors while Anita sat comfortably in the living room, laughing softly at stories meant to exclude her. Then one afternoon, Adana made her move. Anita would be staying, temporarily, she said, just until she sorted something out. But temporary things have a way of becoming permanent in houses ruled by manipulation. And suddenly, Sarah was no longer just a wife. She was competition. Anita began cooking for Peter, sitting closer to him, speaking gently when Sarah was within earshot. It was subtle, calculated, designed to erode confidence rather than explode it. But pressure is patient. You deserve a child, Adana would whisper to him. A man needs legacy. Legacy. The word wrapped around him like a chain. And then, almost as if destiny itself was mocking Sarah, the announcement came. Anita was pregnant. The house erupted in celebration. Drums, food, laughter that echoed down the corridor like triumph. Adana stood tall that day, eyes shining not with joy, but victory. Sarah stood in the corner, her heart cracking quietly, because she knew something wasn't right. Deep down, beneath the pain and humiliation, beneath the exhaustion and prayer, a whisper stirred inside her. This story was not over. And the child growing in Anita's womb was carrying more than life. It was carrying a secret. Pregnancy changed everything. The same house that once felt heavy with tension now felt alive with music. Visitors came daily. Food was cooked in excess. Laughter bounced off the walls like nothing dark had ever lived there. Anita moved through the house like a crowned queen, one hand always resting on her growing stomach. And Adana? She glowed. "This is what we prayed for," she would say loudly, making sure Sarah could hear every word. Sarah tried to smile. She tried to be supportive. She even brought Anita water at night when cravings struck. But something inside her refused to rest. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't bitterness. It was instinct. Because for all the closeness suddenly forced between Peter and Anita, there was something missing. Peter wasn't glowing. He was distant, distracted, watching more than celebrating. He tried to convince himself the child was a blessing, that maybe this was God's strange way of answering prayers. After all, pressure had pushed him toward Anita more than once. Weak moments had happened. Regret followed quickly, but they had happened. Still, the timeline didn't sit right in his spirit. As Anita's belly grew, so did her confidence. She stopped pretending to be modest. She corrected Sarah openly. She took over the kitchen. She began speaking about the baby as though she had secured permanent ownership of the house. "Some women are just not built for motherhood," she once said casually, folding baby clothes in front of Sarah. Adana didn't correct her. The day Anita went into labor, the house transformed into a celebration ground. Prayers filled the air. Calls were made. Peter paced the hospital hallway, anxiety knotting his stomach. And then the baby cried. A boy. Adana wept openly. "Our legacy," she declared. But when the nurse placed the child into Peter's arms, something inside him went cold. The baby was beautiful, healthy, but the resemblance everyone expected to see wasn't there. No familiar features, no trace of him, no hint of the Okafor line. He pushed the thought away. Babies change, he told himself. They grow into their faces. Still, doubt is a seed that doesn't die once planted. Days later, a quiet rumor reached his ears. A careless whisper from someone who knew Anita before she became chosen. She used to move with different men. Peter confronted Anita gently at first. She laughed it off, called it jealousy, said people hated seeing women rise. But pressure reveals cracks. Her answers began to shift. Small contradictions, stories that didn't align, nervous glances when certain names were mentioned. And then one evening, when Peter insisted on clarity, Anita broke. Not fully, just enough. Tears, begging, words tumbling over themselves. "It was before. It didn't mean anything. I was confused." Confused? Peter's heart pounded. He did the one thing no one expected him to do. He requested a test. How dare you question the blessing God has given us? But truth does not fear examination. When the results returned, the house that once echoed with celebration fell into a silence heavier than shame. The child was not Peter's. And suddenly, the womb that was once called barren was no longer the greatest shock in the family, because the real barrenness had been something else entirely, and it was about to be exposed. The silence in the Okafor house after the DNA results was suffocating. No one shouted, no plates were broken, no dramatic fainting, just silence. Peter sat at the dining table long after everyone had retreated to their rooms, the paper still in his hands. The words were simple, clinical, final, not the father. Across the house, Anita cried, not the cry of a woman caught in betrayal, but the cry of someone whose safety had collapsed. Her voice trembled as she begged Peter to forgive her. She blamed loneliness. She blamed pressure. She blamed fear. But every excuse sounded smaller than the damage done. Adana did not cry. She was angry. Not because of the deception, not because of the humiliation, but because control had slipped through her fingers. How could you embarrass this family, she hissed at Anita, after everything we did for you? Everything we did. Those words lingered in Peter's mind. Everything. The puzzle pieces began aligning in ways he had ignored before. The sudden cruelty towards Sarah, the relentless pressure, the way Anita appeared exactly when doubt was strongest. The strange confidence Adana carried even before Anita announced her pregnancy. Peter confronted his sister, not as a younger brother, but as a man whose home had been invaded. Did you ever want this marriage to survive? He asked quietly. Adana's silence said more than any confession. But the unraveling didn't stop there. As Anita's situation worsened, fear pushed her toward desperation. She began pleading with Sarah, the very woman she had mocked. I was used, Anita sobbed one night. Your sister-in-law promised me security. She said if I helped create distance between you and Peter, I would never lack. Sarah felt something shift inside her. Not triumph, not revenge, clarity. Helped create distance how? She asked. Anita hesitated. Then the truth spilled out in fragments. The visits, the instructions, the pressure to seduce Peter, the encouragement to announce pregnancy quickly. And then, almost as an afterthought, she said you would never conceive anyway. Those words struck like thunder. Sarah's mind replayed every strange symptom, every unexplained pain, every delay, every herbal mixture that never worked. And suddenly, what once felt like misfortune felt engineered. Peter demanded answers. Cornered by exposure and betrayal, Adana finally cracked. Not dramatically, but bitterly. I did what was necessary, she said. You were blinded by emotion. I protected this family. Protected by visiting a native doctor, by seeking to bind Sarah's womb, by planting division, by choosing pride over peace. But control built on manipulation always collapses. The truth spread quietly through the extended family. Respect for Adana fractured. Authority without integrity became noise. Anita left the house, her child in her arms, future uncertain. The celebration that once filled the walls became a cautionary tale whispered in markets and gatherings. And Sarah? Something unexpected happened. Freed from constant humiliation and spiritual oppression, her body began to heal. Slowly, naturally, without fear breathing down her neck. Months later, after counseling, prayer, medical checks, and distance from toxicity, Sarah discovered she was pregnant, not by force, not by competition, not by manipulation, but by love. The house that once echoed with cruelty softened. Peter stood differently now. No longer a boy seeking approval, but a man who had learned the cost of silence. As for Adana, power no longer followed her voice. She remained in the family, but the weight of what she had done lived quietly around her. Sometimes justice is not loud punishment. Sometimes it is living with the mirror of your own actions. When Sarah finally gave birth, the cry of her child sounded like restoration. The womb that was once called barren had never been empty. It had simply been bound by envy. And when truth was born, It didn't just expose deception, it restored destiny.